Hello and welcome to the latest edition of At the Crossroads, CFTC and DOJ Enforcement. I'm Matt Kluchenek, a partner at Mayer Brown, member of Mayer Brown's Litigation and Dispute Resolution Group, and I'm joined again today by my partner, Glen Kopp, also a member of Mayer Brown's Litigation and Dispute Resolution Group and a former federal prosecutor out of the Southern District of New York. So in the past several sessions, we've focused primarily on spoofing and manipulation enforcement. We've talked about the CFTC's efforts, the SEC, the various SROs. Today, we're going to dip into the arena of criminal spoofing and manipulation enforcement, and principally talk about the DOJ. So to kick things off here, Glen, so we have Maine Justice based in DC. We've got, U.S. Attorneys Offices across the country. Talk a little bit about the dynamic between U.S. Attorneys Offices and Maine Justice, particularly in the context of, the spoofing and manipulation regime, if you will.
Sure, Matt. So I think historically, DOJ has played a coordinating role across the country in various topics. Over the last sort of decade plus, you've seen a sort of an aggressive growth from DOJ, which and Maine Justice has a number of prosecutors, over 100 prosecutors at DOJ, but there's an aggressive growth in the commodities and securities enforcement space, especially in the commodity space, in terms of being sort of leading cases and sort of taking over cases. And you see that not just in you see that on the ground, but you see it in the way that they've announced developments and rechristened various groups outside of the commodities and security space. The Foreign Corrupt Practices Act group at DOJ is clearly a leader in bringing those cases. They work with local U.S. attorneys' offices, but the lead prosecutors on those cases tend to be out of DOJ, and the expertise is often built out of DOJ, with some exceptions being in particular out of the New York offices of the U.S. attorneys' offices in Southern and Eastern District of New York. But oftentimes, now what you see is real leadership from DOJ and aggressively taking those cases. And there are actually turf wars between who sort of leads those matters. And you're seeing it in the commodity space with not just the Eastern and Southern District of New York, but also in the Northern District of Illinois, where you have prosecutors who have real depth of experience within those U.S. attorneys' offices, but they're working hand in hand with DOJ. And this goes back, a number of years, back 2018, 2019 period, when DOJ sort of rechristened the Securities and Financial Fraud Unit as the Market Integrity and Major Crimes Unit. And they highlighted a focus on commodities fraud within that group. They brought in prosecutors to run that group who had been at U.S. attorneys' offices, who have developed an expertise, especially in the spoofing context, having brought a number of spoofing cases, having gone to trial in those spoofing cases. And that's a distinction, sort of trial attorney that you think about within the U.S. attorney's offices versus DOJ. I think historically, again, we've thought less about DOJ as a trial group. And now I think more so, especially in the commodity space, you're seeing them get those trial experience. And that, I think, makes a more well-rounded prosecutor and allows them to build better cases because of that. And you're talking about a unit, this market integrity unit that has about 40 plus prosecutors. So it's big, it's robust. They can do a lot there. They've got now more resources from investigation perspective in terms of having dedicated agents working with them. So again, DOJ as a leader in bringing individual cases, it's a new world over the last number of years, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
And to be clear, Maine Justice, as well as U.S. attorneys' offices, have always been involved in certain types of significant commodities-related, securities-related customer harm cases, Ponzi schemes, stuff like that. But the sea change really occurred within Maine Justice with respect to market credibility types of investigations in cases. So things like spoofing, disruptive trading, and manipulation, where there isn't necessarily, there are alleged victims, but it's not like a Ponzi scheme. It's not like certain types of your traditional types of commodities cases really focused on credibility harm that then results ultimately to damages to the market as a whole and various market participants. And credit goes to the DOJ. Clearly, there's been some successes. Clearly, they've developed a lot of expertise within the unit. They've brought in, they've had CFTC details from time to time, and really and quite impressively have gotten their arms around this relatively arcane body of law. And so certainly agree with you, Glenn. Appears to be no abatement in anytime in the near future. In fact, I would expect there to probably be an increase with respect to securities related spoofing, manipulation, and other types of market credibility offenses. So when we, kind of following up on that last point, we think about how Maine justice goes about getting its cases. Obviously, there's a bunch of avenues. I know in the commodity space, significant avenue has been the close relationship between DOJ and the CFTC, and in particular, Division of Enforcement Director. And so for a number of years, we've had directors of DOE who have brought with them not only civil experience, but also criminal experience. Many have been former federal prosecutors. And so I think that is really nurtured and just created the basis for a close, tight relationship. And so you've seen, frankly, over the last several years, an inordinate number of referrals from the CFTC. You've seen parallel coordination, staying away for the most part from joint coordination, but focusing on parallel investigations. And that has really, really been fruitful for the DOJ's commodities criminal enforcement program. Glenn, stepping back into your shoes as a former federal prosecutor, SDNY, talk a little bit about other ways that cases would come to you, or you would ferret out potential wrongdoing.
Yeah, I mean, other than, referrals from other agencies in which they've got sort of civil jurisdiction and they have concerns that there may be criminal conduct. Another great way to get cases was from the agents themselves, right? And you develop relationships with groups of agents, local agents, and they will literally come to you and bring you cases. They will also bring your boss's cases when you're not running a unit, and that will get divvied up among the team. But they're relationships you develop with agents, and that's oftentimes how cases will come to you. They're initiated by the agents under various circumstances, whether they're working sources or they're getting referrals themselves from other agencies. But oftentimes you will get those cases initiated directly from your relationship with agents you've worked with in the field. And obviously in the securities and commodities space, that's often going to be from FBI agents that you've worked with.
And Glenn, given the relatively recent leadership changes within Maine Justice in the fraud section, do you expect next year to bring additional, activity, a further ramp up of activity?
Absolutely, Matt. I mean, we've talked previously about DOJ's sort of publicity campaign to highlight their focus on white collar and corporate enforcement. The resources being put there, especially when it comes to people power from FBI agents, additional prosecutors. I do think you're going to see a ramping up of activity. It's been relatively quiet in terms of big announcements, I think in part because of the administrative changes that have been made, leadership changes. I don't think that's slowed down the line prosecutors and agents. And so I think as we come into 2022, there'll be some big announcements, big cases, and I don't see that abating anytime soon.
And more of the same, right? But we're also seeing through some representations a pushing of the boundaries, right? And expanding of the boundaries. And so not just spoofing and manipulation, not just, insider trading, but other areas. And so it's going to be really interesting if and when some of this stuff breaks. Thanks to everyone for watching this episode. Take care.